Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to start in just one moment. All right, here we go. What? You could have sat home, but it's better live. So Purim is right around the corner, and of course, the cornerstone of the Purim experience is reading the Megillah. And we are going to focus on a particular passage in the Megillah that we know because we know the general storyline. But when we stop and think about it, I think a number of questions will be raised, and we'll do our best to go through the questions, break it down, and hopefully leave this class with a more nuanced understanding of a very complex issue. The issue I'm going to be speaking about today is, why didn't Mordechai bow down to Haman? So again, I think that many of us have this general picture in our mind of Haman, this big burly fellow walking past Mordechai, and Mordechai standing obstinate, unwilling to bow down to this wicked man, Haman. But when you look at the text again, you see that it's actually more complex than that. We'll try to understand Mordechai's motivations and also understand how we evaluate the decision that Mordechai made. So let's look carefully and slowly in source number 1. This is the very beginning of chapter 3. At the end of chapter 2, that's when Mordechai gets wind of the fact that Bigsan and Zeresh, two of Achashverosh's advisors, plot to assassinate Achashverosh. Mordechai hears of it, sends word, and that good deed that Mordechai does to save the life of the king gets written down. And now we pick up in the beginning of chapter 3. The Megillah reads as follows: Achar hadivrim ha'ela, after these matters, Gidel hamelach Achashverosh es Haman ben Hamedasa ha'agagi. Achashverosh gives a promotion to Haman, Vayinasehu, and he raises him up, Vayasem es kiso me'al kol hasarim asher ito. And essentially, Achashverosh gives Haman a promotion above all the other advisors. Pasuk Beis, V'chol avdei hamelech asher b'shar hamelech korim u'mishpachavim leHaman. All the servants of the king that are at the gate of the palace bow down to Haman. Why do they do so? Ki chen tziva lo hamelech, because that is the command of the king. It seems that Achashverosh at least gave his approval, if not directly commanded, that people bow down to Haman. What's the simple reason why people are bowing down to Haman? He's number 2 in command. He show of deference. Bowing down is not always associated with idolatry. It's a show of deference. Bowing down. Mordechai lo yichra lo yishtachave. But the Megillah tells us, the very end of verse 2, Mordechai does not bow and does not prostrate himself. Why? Does the Megillah tell us why Mordechai does not bow down? Any reason that the Megillah itself tells us?
Also, it says that the king commanded that everybody bows down. Therefore, right. He's disobeying the king.
Correct. Therefore, he is disobeying the king. That is correct. But very ambiguous in terms of Mordechai's motivations, why he chooses not to bow down. Now, does this really upset Haman? Does this boil Haman's blood? So again, if you would ask me, I would tell you absolutely. It really upset Haman. He was furious. Now, ultimately, that was the case. But initially, what was it like for Haman to see this? So let's look very carefully at the next verse to see how much it bothered Haman. Vayomru avdei hamelech. And the servants of the king said, Asher b'shar hamelech, that sat at the entranceway to the palace, Mordechai. They say to Mordechai, Madua ato veres mitzvahs hamelech. Why do you violate the king's orders? So what's Haman's response? This is a trick question. What's Haman's response? The very next verse, after learning that Mordechai does not bow down, what is Haman's response? The answer is, there is no response. Is Haman perturbed by what's taking place? No, we don't know. Who intercedes here? Who's the one that gets all upset? Avdei HaMelech, the servants of the king. we find no reference, at least initially, to Haman being upset. You just have, I don't know, we'll use the phrase, the honor guards. The honor guards of the king that sat at the entranceway to the palace. They say, listen, it's just not what's done here. When an officer of the king, the likes of which Haman is, walks by, you got to bow down. Does Haman really get upset?
But he must have done it demonstratively.
He must have, but it couldn't have been that demonstrative because Haman doesn't even notice. Look at us. So it could be that Haman's head is so big that he doesn't even notice Mordechai standing up to him. Good. Let's look at Pasuk Talid. Ayihi ke'amram elav yom v'yom. And it was when the servants of the king, again, not Haman, the servants of the king kept belaboring this point to Mordechai, like, you're not following protocol. V'lo shama aleihem, and he did not listen to the servants of the king. Vayagidu leHaman. What does that mean? And they told Haman, Haman's head was either in the clouds, or there were so many people at the entranceway to the palace that Haman didn't even notice what Mordechai was doing. Vayagidu leHaman. They had to tell Haman. Liros. They wanted to see Haya Amdu Divrei Mordechai. Will the Mordechai's will, stand? Will he remain obstinate? Kihigilahem Asher Hu Yehudi. Because Mordechai told them that he was Jewish. Right? That's the first inkling of a hint. Why Mordechai was acting the way that he was. But just take note of this. Right? We become so habituated with the general storyline that we don't pay attention to the text. I talk about this all the time. Right? Sometimes we are our greatest foes when it comes to learning Tanakh because we hear the stories, we become habituated with the stories, and then we don't pay attention. In our mind, the first moment that Mordechai refuses to stand up to Haman, that's it. Haman goes home, he's furious, and he decides to wipe out the Jewish people. But just reading the text slowly demonstrates to us that Haman did not even notice initially. It's the king's servants who are the ones that see what's going on here, and they have to tell Haman what Mordechai is doing. Haman doesn't even notice it himself. Unbelievable.
But obviously, Mordechai is trying to evoke
correct
something.
Well, no, I disagree with you, Leon. I said correct too quickly. Was Mordechai? Leon, all I'm trying to say is that from the text itself, it's not abundantly clear if Mordechai was trying to evoke anything. It could be that Mordechai was trying to remain subtle in his ways, trying to sort of stay in the background, not trying to make a fuss. And that could be why Haman did not even see him. Maybe every time Haman was passing by, Mordechai's cell phone rang, so he had to turn around, and it wasn't evident that he was defying the king's orders. Let's just look a little bit further. Verse 5. Vayar Haman ki ein Mordechai koreo mishtachavelo. Now Haman sees that Mordechai is not bowing down to him. Vayimale Haman chema. And now Haman gets upset. So what I'm trying to show you is that Mordechai's actions could not have been that transparent to everybody. His motivations couldn't have been that clear to all. Because if Mordechai was trying to be defiant and obstinate from the very beginning, why does it take till Pasuk Hey for Haman to get upset? Why does it take to Pasuk Hey? Clearly, this was not something that was front and center. What we do with that, so that remains a bit more ambiguous. That's more of our job to interpret this text. But I think the text screams out to us ambiguity at best, because we don't have forceful actions here. We have subtle actions. And let's just finish off the group of psukim that we're going to look at. Verse 6, Pasuk Vav, Vayivez be'enav, Haman thought it was not appropriate just to punish Mordechai alone. Because he was told the nation of Mordechai. And again, one could assume that that might have something to do with Haman's desire for revenge. Oh, Mordechai is a Jew. We'll get there. Haman desires to kill the entire nation of Mordechai, and you get the sense that it had Mordecai's nation, his religious identity, had something to do with his obstinance. So we are going to have to break this down. There's much to talk about. We could have a 5-hour cheer. We're not going to, but I will try to give some highlights of what I have found along the way, mostly based on 3 resources. I found a wonderful article on the Gush website by Professor Yonatan Grossman. Found a wonderful article online from Rabbi Alex Israel, who's a Rabbi in Israel. And I just also did my own snooping around here and there. So those are the 3 resources that we'll be using from today. Judy,
before you go,
just 1 second. Leon, 1 second. Judy, no, it's okay. Yeah.
It said in the third Pasuk Dalet, "Higid lahem asher hu Yehudi." So apparently, being Jewish was important to
correct.
to Mordecai, that's saying, "I'm a Jew, therefore I don't."
Correct, but again, what I would ask you is, was Mordecai flaunting that, or was he trying to be? I don't know if that's.
Said,
I'm not sure if that's the case. We don't. Right, that's great, but how forceful was Mordecai trying to communicate that? In other words, was Mordecai standing in the back and trying to blend into the crowd? You get the sense. So, if this was motivated by this desire to say, "I'm a Jew and I'm not going to bow down," I'm not sure if that's born out of the text, because it took a long time for Haman to realize what's going on over here. I don't think it was such a public display of religion.
Rabbi, the fact is that this is the custom of the land.
Okay, correct.
Right? Therefore, everyone who is seen as Haman is emerging has to bow in, because he represents a certain importance of the state.
Oh, correct. Right? I don't disagree with you, but
the mere act of refusal to do is a kind of you can say it. Is offending the public.
That definitely could be.
Everybody's eyes immediately lock in onto him. You see,
Leon, I agreed with everything you said up to the last point, that everybody's eyes locked in. The text itself remains ambiguous. And you have to just, again, take note that Haman does not notice what was happening until a few verses later. So when everyone's eyes locked in, well, where were Haman's eyes? My point is,
Haman
it might not have been.
Do it. Haman has to only look what the crowd is doing.
And he just misses Mordecai.
We have a sense of how many people were there.
We don't know. Well, in Professor Yonatan Grossman's article, he notes that when you look at the books that are illustrated, like the Megillas Esther's that are illustrated, you look. It seems on the pictures that Haman's passing by and Mordecai standing right there in front, and that really was likely not the case, just based on the flow of the text. So let's jump into it right now and try to understand, why doesn't Mordecai bow down?
Your question, just
yes.
How does Haman know that he is Yehudi?
Well, Yehudi is probably the most general term to mean Jew.
That he belongs to.
How does Mordecai know?
Where?
In the end of the verse Dal Pasuk Dal, it says Higid lahem asher hu Yehudi. He tells the officers that he's a Jew. Yeah, he tells them that he's a Jew. So why doesn't Haman bow down? Why doesn't Haman bow down? Where is this coming from? His unwillingness to follow what was likely just protocol. And Leon, I agree with you. It was protocol to bow down, and we'll see later on in the source sheet that many of our ancestors have bowed down to people of importance and dignitaries. So there wasn't anything particularly wrong with an act of protocol, simply following in line with what's expected. So that only reinforces the need to figure out what is going on. So let us try to figure this out. So if you look in source number 2, the Medrash in Esther Rabbah tells us that this was more than simply protocol and bowing down when a dignitary walks by. There is more lurking beneath the surface. What is lurking beneath the surface? So the Medrash in source number 2 writes as follows. Go based on the pasuk that all of the servants at the entranceway to the palace were bowing down. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina Pasach. So Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, when he would start his shir on Megillas Esther, actually turned to a verse in Tehillim, which I have for you in full. Part of the difficulty of learning Medrash is that they quote many obscure psukim, and if you don't know the meaning of the pasuk, you're sort of lost in the beauty of the Medrash. What is it really getting at? So I have the full verse for you in source number 3. This is a pasuk from Tehillim, Perek Kuf Mem, chapter 140, where David HaMelech writes, Tamnu ge'im pachli, v'chavalim parsu reshes liyad ma'agal, mokshim shasuli selam. Okay, now you know it. Good. I'm just kidding, because that's a hard pasuk to translate. Let's look at the English. Haughty men have concealed a snare for me, and with ropes they spread a net beside my path. They lay traps for me constantly. So David HaMelech is clearly feeling on the attack, constantly dodging the bullets of the enemy. So says the Medrash as follows in source number 2. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina Pasach Tamnu Ge'im Pachli, that the haughty men have concealed the trap for me. Amra Knesset Yisrael Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Jewish people say to God, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Mitsuda Parsuli, Ovdei Kochavim Lahapilini. The idolaters, the Gentiles, have spread out traps to catch me. Omrim Li, they're saying to me, Avod Avodas Kochavim. The Gentiles are trying to get me to bow down to idolatry. Im ani shoma'as lahem, if I listen to them, ne'anashti, I will be punished. V'im ein ani shomea lahem, and if I don't listen to them, ein hargunosi, they're going to kill me. So I'm stuck. Basically, I've got a trap this way, I've got a trap that way. Either way I go, I'm going to fall down. Mashal is ze'ev. This can be compared to a zev, not Goldberg, that would be me, but a wolf. Mashal is zev shetzama lemayim, who was very thirsty. Uparsu lo mitsuda al pi ha'ma'ayan. But the hunters have placed a net over the well. Omar im eri lishto. So if I go down to the well and drink, harini nitzod, I will be caught. V'im lo ered, harini meispit saman. If I don't go down, I'm going to die of thirst. In other words, the Medrash is painting this picture where the Jewish people, and I think really it's Mordechai in particular, felt trapped. If they don't bow down, so then they're going to be accused of violating the protocols of the king. If they do bow down, so there is an idolatrous dimension somehow connected, woven into the act of bowing. And Mordechai was really struggling with this. This particular point is really echoed by the Rishonim. The medieval commentaries on Megillas Esther, there are not so many of them, and they all focus on this dimension of idolatry. Look at Rashi in source number 4. Why was everyone bowing down to Haman? She'asa atzmo Eloha. He made himself into a deity. Lefikach, and that's why Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh. Mordechai did not bow down because Mordechai understood that the bowing down was not simply deference to a dignitary, but actually had a dimension of idolatry implicit in the act of bowing. The Ibn Ezra echoes those sentiments, plays it a little bit differently in source number 5. So, right, the Ibn Ezra, Yiduim v'nachum. It is known and is correct. Masher darshu rabboseinu zal. What our rabbis teach us, kitzuras selem v'avodah zara hayu b'bigadav. That there was some sort of, what's the Yiddish word? A getchka, right? Did I say that correctly? Like a cross or something along those lines. It's a getchka. Did I say that? No? Anybody? No Yiddish helpers here? Judy, I'm going to rely on your thumbs up. Yeah, it's some sort of idolatrous symbol. No, isn't it Geshka? Something along those lines. No, Yashka, I know Yashka. I mean, I don't personally know Yashka. Okay, whatever it is. The point is, there was some sort of idolatrous symbol on Haman's clothing. Kitsuras tselem. He had an image of a tselem, of an idol on his clothing. Again, he had some sort of pagan form, some picture, or on his hat. So bowing down to Haman was not simply bowing down to an important dignitary, but rather it was bowing down or giving respect to an idol. And that was a very serious issue for a Jew. The Medrash in source number 6 is quoted by the Torah Tamima. You know, the Torah Tamima, Rabbi Epstein, in his work, what he does is he takes every pasuk in the Torah, certainly in Ksuvim, I'm not sure if it's on Nevi'im, and he shows you where that pasuk is quoted in the Torah Shabbal Peh. So he shows you where the pasuk is quoted in the Medrash, where the pasuk is quoted in the Gemara. It's an unbelievable work, and in his footnotes, he gives further elaboration on the different points. So he quotes over here on the words Mordechai lo yichra. He quotes from the Medrash Rabbah. And the Medrash says, V'chi kantaron, was he a contrarian? Interesting overlay between the English word and the Hebrew word. V'chi kantron haya, was Mordechai this contrarian? V'over al gezeras hamelech, and he was looking simply to violate the desires and the decrees of the king? Why was Mordechai doing that, right? As Jews in the exile, we need to be very, very humble. We can't stand up and demand our needs be met immediately because we're guests in a host country. So what was Mordechai doing? Ella kishetziva Achashverosh lehishtachavos lahaman. When Achashverosh gave the word that we're going to be, that everybody has to bow down to Haman, chakak avodas kochavim al libo. Haman somehow etched this pagan idol, or this form, this picture on his chest. And he had in mind that when people would bow down to him, it wasn't just bowing down to a dignitary of the king, but it was bowing down to idolatry. What was motivating Haman to do so? Why wasn't he just sufficiently happy with people bowing down to him? It's an interesting question. You know, sometimes people use religion as the platform for their own self-aggrandizement. So perhaps Haman was under the impression that if he's able to put a idolatrous form on his clothing, it will only enhance his own honor. Something along those lines. I just thought this was very interesting. If you look at Rashi versus the Ibn Ezra, a careful analysis of the two, there's a little bit of a different nuance here. Again, if you ask Rashi, where was the idolatry in source number 4? What would Rashi tell you?
Himself.
He made himself. Sh'asa atzmo avodah. He made himself an idol. He was the deity. If you look in the Ibn Ezra, what does the Ibn Ezra say?
Deity, that making himself
correct
so important.
Correct. He made himself into a god of sorts with lowercase g. And but just give me a moment, Leon, because I think I want to answer your question if you look in source number 7. But according to Ibn Ezra, what was the nature of the idolatry? Itzuras tzelem v'avodah zarah hayu bibigadav. Where was the idolatry? On his clothing. So the Torah Tamima deals with this issue. He says, well, which one was it? Was it that he made himself into a god, or was it that he put a picture of a god on his clothing? And the Medrash in source number 6 also says chakak avos kochavim alibo, which means he etched a picture, not literally on his heart, but it means that he etched it onto his clothing. So which one was it? Did he himself become a deity, or was he asking everyone to bow down to a picture that was on his clothes? So what would you say? In what way? Correct. Interesting. But so the Torah Tamima, I think, says along the lines of what you're saying, that he explains that the way people believed in those days is that people got their power from a god, an idol, whatever it was, but that god imbued the human with a power, with a religious power. So it was both. In other words, he felt that this picture, whatever it was that people were bowing down to, was significant, but it was also imbuing him with a level of a godliness. So it was one and the same. They're not really conflicting opinions. They're complementary opinions. Just look at the Torah Tamima in source number 7. This is in the footnotes where he analyzes the text. He notes that this idea that Haman made himself into a god or had people bowing down to a god is reflected in the Gemara Megillah and the Gemara in Sanhedrin, where it says, She'asa Haman atzmo Eloha. He made himself into a god. V'chein mashma milashon hamedrash Rabbah, and that seems to also be the gist you get from the Medrash Rabbah. And then the Torah Timima says in the second line, "V'tzarech biur lechavein inyan zeh bichlal." You have to figure out what does that mean. You have to also square it away with the language of the Medrash that the God was on his clothing. Which one was it? So I thought this was interesting in source number 7, paragraph number 2. V'tzarech lomar dehakavana hi sheratza Haman leharos shehavodas kochavim masra lo koach. That the idol, that the deity masra lo koach gave him the ability to be a god of sorts. Shehu mashpia livni adam tzarcheim. Like Haman believed that he was the one, he was the conduit through which all the blessings of the gods would be sending all of their earthly delights. Velos alzeh chokik avodas kochav malito. In order to enhance this point, he puts an image on his chest. Lahoros ki hu v'avodas kochavim chadu. That he and the God were one. A tremendous amount of arrogance, right? Not only to believe in a God, but to believe in a God that makes you a God. So that's the way the Torah Timima puts it all together. They're not conflicting reports. It's really one and the same. Haman believed in a certain pagan God, and he believed that that pagan God endowed him with a deity-like status, and that's how he held himself. And Mordechai was unwilling to go along with this. It's one thing to follow the protocols if it's purely a secular protocol of bowing down in deference. But once it becomes religious in nature, Mordechai said, I will not do so. No way, no how. And the Malbim in source number 8 points out that Mordechai did a good job of explaining to the king that he will, or I should say the officers of the kings, that he will never do so. Because if you look back at Pasuk Beis, the end of the Pasuk, Mordechai, it should be in past tense, right? It should say, Mordechai lo kara v'lo hishtachaveh. Mordechai did not bow or prostrate himself. It doesn't say that. The language is in the atid, in the future. Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh. Mordechai will not, in the future, bow down or prostrate. And the Malbim explains in source number 7, which we're not going to look at inside because it's already getting late, that Mordechai did a good job of communicating that under no circumstance will he ever in the future bow down to this deity. So that is the approach of Rashi, of Ibn Ezra. You see this in the Medrash, that Mordechai understood that this is not simply a casual pariv expression of deference to a king, but rather it was wrapped up in a idolatrous religious undertone. Perhaps it was even more explicit than that. And Mordechai said he will not do so. And again, I go back to the question we asked before. How strongly did Mordechai protest this? Not clear from the text. Sometimes you go to someone's house and you don't, you're not comfortable with their level of kashrus, for example. Okay, so they put some food in front of you. What do? You get up and you throw the plate on the floor and you say, I don't eat this stuff? Or do you just try to move around the food a little bit so it looks like you ate a little bit, and you hold your stomach to give the impression you're not feeling well? You ask for some fruit because the fruit is... The point is, there are ways to get around uncomfortable situations without making it glaringly obvious what you are doing. So, I'm sorry? Sometimes it okay, but again, we just have to consider this was Mordechai making a macha, taking a stand with fervor, or was Mordechai simply saying, this is uncomfortable for me, I'm going to try to blend into the background, and at a certain point, the officers of the king picked up on it, and they called him out on it. That point we will never know. All we know is the text, and the text does not tell us a clear proof one way or the other. That is answer number 1. There is a different way of understanding Mordechai's reason, his motivation for not bowing down, that's born out of a very interesting medrash in source number 9. This is the medrash in Esther Rabbah. The first paragraph will sound very similar to what we have been saying before. The second paragraph will introduce something unique. In source number 9, paragraph number 1. Ma amar lehem Mordechai, Lamisha amar lo, madua ata over mitzvah samelach. The Medrash wants to know, what did Mordechai say to the honor guard, that was standing there saying, hey, you're not following protocol over here. Why are you bowing down? What did Mordechai say? Rabbi Levi said, Amar lahem Mordechai. Moshe Rabbeinu hisir lanu b'Torah. Moshe already warned us. Arur ha'ish asher yaseh pesel u'masecha. Right? Cursed is the man who bows down, who makes some sort of pesel, some sort of idol or masked image. In other words, anyone that bows down to something with religious value that is not Jewish. And this evil man Haman made himself into a god. I can't bow down to that. Yeshayahu Nabi, he's hardened when Yeshayahu already tells us, never bow down, never take a man too seriously, because it's just a mere mortal. Fine, that's along the lines of what we've been seeing so far, that Mordechai saw idolatry as the main issue. However, listen to the next paragraph. Vilo og. According to the Medrash, Mordechai either articulated this or was thinking this. What's more, Ela sha'ani it's gan tirin shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm like the prize, the student of God. What does that mean? Shekol hashvatim noldu b'chutz laaretz. All of the tribes were born in the exile. At that time, I don't know if you could formally call it exile, because when the Shvatim were born by Lavan, was that really exile, or they certainly were not born in the land of Israel, right? Chutz laaretz. Is Zikni, but my Zaidi, a reference to, anyone know? Binyamin. My Zaidi Binyamin, nolad be'artzel. He was born in Israel. Amru lei, vinimar lei. So the officers say, okay, well, we'll have to tell this to Haman. Miyad, immediately what happens? Vayagidu leHaman. That's the pasuk where it says the officers told Haman. Amrun lei, zikno, halo ishtachavel zikni. Haman says, I'm not impressed. Your Zaidi bow down to my Zaidi. Who was Haman's Zaidi? Esav. Who was Mordechai Zaidi? Binyamin. So Haman says, your Zaidi bow down to my Zaidi. It sounds like a conversation on a bus. My dad is stronger than your dad. Ada hu dichsiv. This is what the pasuk is referring to. Vatigashna hashifachot. You see that after all the maidservants go, Bilhah and Zilpah bow down to Esav, so then Yosef, Rachel also go and bow down. Yes, but Mordechai points out that at that point, Binyamin had yet to be born. So Binyamin did not bow down to Esav. Amran lei hahu dichsiv vayagidu leHaman. And that is what the officers brought back to Haman the next round when they said, no, Mordechai tells us he's not bowing down to you because his Zaidi Binyamin never bowed down to Esav. Wow, that's a very rich medrash. Very rich medrash. What do you make of that medrash? What's the medrash teaching us here? Why is it weaving in this meta text? It's not the text itself, but bringing in this conflict between Esav and Binyamin, Esav and Yaakov. What is it showing us here regarding what was motivating Mordechai? Just to summarize again, the officers go to Haman and say, Mordechai, why are you bowing down? And basically what Mordechai says is, my Zaidi never bowed down to his Zaidi. I'm not bowing down to him. What is the Medrash getting at? What do you make of this? It's interesting, right? Very rich in terms of the ability to play with it, to think about it.
I have been loyal to God and will continue to be loyal.
Interesting. But what does that have to do with bowing down to Esav?
Because bowing is a symbol of giving respect.
Interesting. So I think, and this is a point that Rabbi Alex Israel makes, which I thought was very interesting, that the second paragraph here takes away the conflict from being in the realm of religion to being more in the realm of Jewish pride. I'm a Jew. I'm not bowing down to anybody. It's nothing to do with religion. We are proud of our Jewish identity. My Zaidi, he never bowed down to anybody. He wasn't alive at that point. He did not bow down to Esav, and I'm not going to start bowing down to you. because as Jews, we only bow down to God. Again, this wasn't a religious. It wasn't that Haman was avodah zarah at this point. This is simply we as Jews have this national religious pride, and we are not going to bow down to anybody else. I'm sorry.
You're saying that this is genealogy.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, that's what the Medrash is bringing in. So this is not.
But what is it? But the nature in itself is not important. What is important is the set of spiritual beliefs. So it comes back down to the religious foundation of it.
It could be. It could be. But I think it's very interesting that you have here sort of, just go back to the language I was using before, this pride, like Jewish pride, not anything to do with religion per se. My unwillingness is not because you're idolatrous. My unwillingness is because as Jews, we don't submit ourselves to anybody.
But it's more than
yeah.
You know, we don't change.
Right. Interesting.
Catholics, they meet on Friday.
Right.
We don't change.
Interesting.
Us,
right. And in other words, Mordechai is saying that my Zaidi doesn't bow down, and I'm not bowing down. But I think that tradition also is a function of pride. There's a pride in carrying the Masorah, being the bearer of the tradition. I think that Mordechai, in this case, I think that Mordechai was looking to be more obstinate. If you ask me, if you take this approach, Mordechai was standing up quite tall when everybody else was bowing down. If it's the religious perspective, I think Mordechai was trying to blend in, trying to turn his back. Maybe he didn't see Haman passing through. With this approach, you get the sense that Mordechai was standing up quite erect, making a point that as Jews, we don't submit ourselves to anybody else except for the Almighty.
So I think that you may have a point if you consider Mordecai being in Persia, thought of himself as belonging to a nation.
Right.
Then I will.
Good. He was. Listen, Mordecai himself.
Because this is kind of a nationalism or ethnic loyalty.
Listen, let's remember it wasn't that many years ago, certainly less than 100 years ago when the Jews were still back in Israel. Now, while they did sink pretty quickly during the Babylonian exile, and now, of course, it's Cyrus and the Persia have taken over, but the Jews still had a vestige, still had a sense of Jewish pride. And maybe Mordecai's point was less focused on Haman and more focused on his brethren, like Chevra. We should have national pride here. We're not going to simply submit ourselves to the Persians. And maybe Mordecai's approach was this strong approach meant for his brothers and sisters, and less about Haman. And there's a lot to be said here. I want to bring to your attention again. I don't think we're going to have time to do this inside, but the Malbim in source number 10 seems to weave both approaches together. The Malbim essentially says that the Mordecai's refusal to bow down on religious grounds made sense when Haman was far away. But when Mordecai was unwilling to bow down when Haman was close, then it wasn't a religious issue. Then it was simply following protocol. And when Mordecai was unwilling to bow down, even when Haman was close, so that showed us that Mordecai was defying the orders of the king. So from far away, the officers were willing to chalk it up to Mordecai not feeling comfortable with the religious action of bowing. But close up, that already the king's officers interpreted that as an act of defiance and rebellion, and that was not acceptable. Interesting to think about, and then I want to move on to the next section of the shir, is why did Haman get so upset? Okay, so he's got some beef with Mordecai, personal beef with Mordecai. Why did Haman decide to wipe out an entire nation? Why an entire nation? It could be something to think about if it's the second approach of this defiance, this Jewish defiance, this religious national identity, that Haman realized he'll never be able to subjugate a people with such pride. If it's a religious issue, maybe Haman sets himself, give him time, under enough duress, maybe they'll bow. But maybe Haman said to himself, if this is symbolic of the type of approach that the Jews as a whole were going to take, they're not going to play by the rules of our kingdom. We can't have such Jews in our kingdom. Something to think about. You have to play with that a little bit further. I want to focus on the response of everybody else. What do the Jews of Persia, and by extension Chazal, or actually invert that, what do Chazal have to say, and we'll place that into the minds of Jews in Shushan? What did they have to say when Mordechai was defying the king's orders? Was that a point of pride for them? Like finally someone has enough gall to stand up to Haman? Or were they embarrassed? Were they embarrassed by Mordechai's obstinance?
Embarrassed.
Well, can you imagine? Leon, give me a moment. Let me respond to your question. Can you imagine if there was? I'm going to just make up an example. Can you imagine if a Jew is invited to the president for the Hanukkah to the White House for a Hanukkah party, and the rabbi refuses to shake the hand of the president, no matter who the president is? I only shake hands with God. I think I'd be embarrassed. When you're in the White House, not to show an act of honor to the president, a very gracious host to our Jewish people. You don't be embarrassed. I would be embarrassed. There are moments when I'm embarrassed with news articles of Jews that are unwilling to play by the rules of the United States of America. I'm embarrassed.
Suppose the president was a woman.
What?
Suppose the president was a woman.
Right. Yeah. Suppose the president was a woman. I'm not going to rule halachically speaking here, but if the cameras all catch a rabbi unwilling to shake his hand and standing like this, I think that we'd have to think long and hard how to process that and how to guide people.
A mature and rational person,
yeah,
with some knowledge of history of his ethnic group,
right,
would say, what are the implications?
Correct.
On my part, vis-a-vis my community.
Correct.
Which is something totally
different. Again, I want to explore
that.
I
think a rational person
right
would think about.
Well, I want to explore that.
Another question of embarrassment.
Well, okay, so maybe the word embarrassment is not exactly the correct word. That's what comes to my mind. I think I'm viscerally embarrassed when I see a Jew unwilling to play by the rules of our society. Not to say that I think everybody should be, shaking women's hands back and forth. But my point is, there's a certain etiquette that we have to conform to. And when we don't see someone conforming to that etiquette, it makes us all feel a little uncomfortable. I think that that's a very reasonable thing to say. So let's look. If you look in source number 11, the Medrash tells us that God was very pleased with Mordechai's unwillingness to bow down. The Medrash, this is actually a Medrash in Shmos. Amru lo lakadosh baruch hu. The Jewish people say to God, Kol kach lama. Like, why are you subjugating us? Why are you working us so hard in this exile? So Amar Lahem, Kol Hayamim Shani Imahem Ein Notzlin Shemra. Whenever I'm with you in exile, don't worry. It's not bad. I'm with you. In other words, the Jewish people say, like, God, what are you doing to us? And God says back, I'm with you. Don't worry. I'm never abandoning you. And then the Medrash goes on to show numerous instances where the Jewish people acted correctly with God's help in the exile. And one of them is Bimadai in Persia. Hayisi Imahem, I was with you. V'nimtseis shalema. What does shalema mean? What's shalem? Whole. I found you to be whole. You stuck with me too, Chavra. Shene Amar. And what's the proof text? The fact that the Jews remained whole with God. Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachab. Mordechai did not bow down. You see, the Jews stayed with me, says God. Don't worry. I'm not giving you too much trouble because I'm with you in exile, and you meet my standards. So you see here God giving the proverbial emoji thumbs up, right? We did good here. Fascinating point that is about to follow. This is a point that Professor Yonatan Grossen makes. I have Pasuk Dalet for you right here in the next part of the source sheet. This is where Mordechai remains obstinate and will not bow down. Vayhi ke'amram elav yom v'yom, and when they kept coming to him every day, v'lo shama aleihem, Mordechai did not listen to them. Vayagidu haman liharos ha'imidu devrei Mordechai ki yigid lam asher yudi, and Mordechai says, I'm a Jew, I'm not going to bow down. This pasuk sounds extraordinarily similar to another verse. Now, if you've already looked in the search, you can't answer the question. But just, I'm going to read you the language of the pasuk from the Megillah. Vayihi ke'amram elav yom yom v'lo shama alehem. When they kept coming back to him every day, and he would not listen to them. What does that sound awfully familiar to, ladies and gentlemen? What does that sound awfully familiar to? Well, interesting. No, Yosef and Potiphar. Look at the next verse. Vayihi kidabra el Yosef. And it was when Potiphar, Ashes Potiphar, spoke to Yosef. She was trying to seduce him. Yom, v'lo shama aleha. He did not listen to her. Ladies and gentlemen, look, just compare the puzzle. It's exactly the same. Look at the verse. Vayihi, kamram, kidabra, elav, el Yosef, yom, v'lo shama aleha, v'lo shama aleha. It's the same exact verse. So what do we make of that? So Professor Jonathan Grossman suggests that this is the author of the Megillah tipping his hat and letting us know that Mordechai did the right thing. Because just like we praise Yosef for refusing to be seduced by Ashes Potiphar, in fact, he gets the term Yosef HaTzadik because his superhuman courage, his superhuman fortitude to refuse this beautiful woman. By paralleling the language, the Megillah is telling us this must have also taken superhuman courage not to bow down to Haman. Think about the enormous pressure that was placed on Mordechai at this juncture in time, and his unwillingness to bow down because either it was Avodah Zarah or because we are Jews and we have a backbone. But one way or the other, the parallel is striking. And says Professor Grossman, the author of the Megillah, is telling us that Mordechai did correct. And it does so, it communicates to us by paralleling the pasuk by Yosef. Just like by Yosef, it was abundantly clear that he did the right thing. So too the Megillah is telling us that Mordechai also did the right thing by not bowing down. This point is really made by the Medrash in source number 12. And he notes that there are incredible parallels between Mordechai and Yosef. That could be a shir to itself, which I'm not going to give. But let me just point out a couple of parallels, and I'll let you do the rest of the thinking. So both Yosef and Mordechai are able to withhold the pressure, don't give in. What happens to both of them? They both become second in command, don't they? Yosef becomes the second in command. At the end of the story, who's the one who's wearing the king's ring? It's Mordechai. They take it off from Haman. They put it on Yosef. What happens? What happens when they're in the favor of the king? So we know that by Yosef, he rides on the king's chariot. What happens to Mordechai? He rides on the king's chariot. There is a lot to say in terms of the parallel here, but we are not going to delve into it. I give it as a food for thought. Think about what was the deeper message of the parallel. But what I wanted to show you, and I thought this was a very compelling point from Professor Grossman, is that the Megillah does tell us that we approve of Mordechai's actions. It does so by paralleling the language by Yosef. However, it's
How
not.
does one
Yeah.
compare to the other?
Well, the text.
Analogy.
Well, that's why I said we're not focusing on this, Leon. That's food for thought. You can discuss with your wife.
Can you imagine those who overcame the temptation of
Right.
a woman?
Right, correct. But so that gives you but Leah, it gives you a sense of the type of force and pressure Mordechai must have been feeling to give in and just bow down, just bow down. Now you get a little bit of a mixture. Yeah. If you look at the next in source number 13, look at source number 13. The Ibn Ezra, I think, hedges his bets. The Ibn Ezra, on the one hand, questions why Mordechai got us into this mess. And on the other hand, gives us a very pirate answer. Ibn Ezra, this is his commentary on Pasuk Dalid. Ki higid lahem asher hu Yehudi, ki hu asur lo. Mordechai makes it clear he can't bow down. V'hinei asks Ibn Ezra, yesh lisho. We have to ask, lama hichnis Mordechai atzo b'sakana. Why did Mordechai place himself in such danger? Ki hichnis kol Yisrael. Not only did he place himself in danger, he got the entire nation of Israel almost obliterated. What did he do this for? You know what he should have done? he should have spoken to Esther. And he should have requested a job transfer. So his job was to sit at the palace of the king. Maybe he was one of the low-down advisors at that point. But he should have asked for a transfer. A person's uncomfortable in a work environment. Instead of quitting, he has to be moved to a different location. He did have a good contact inside the palace, didn't he? It was Esther. Below Yachis as Haman, he shouldn't have angered Haman. He saw that this was Haman's time to shine, and he shouldn't have meddled with him. He should have just let him be and just left. So you see, what's the implicit judgment call here that the question assumes? Like, Mordechai, what are you doing? Why did you have to defy the king in such a public way? Just ask to be moved. Implicit in the question, I hear a tone of Mordechai, you didn't do so good here. This was not wise. There would have been a more astute way of dealing with the issue. I think that that's the underlying tone of the question. Mordechai, what are you doing here? You got us into such a mess. You could have averted the disaster altogether. And the answer is very parif. The answer that Ibn Ezra provides, Batshuva, Kilo Yuchal Lisur Mishar Hamelech. You can't just leave from the gate of the palace. Kim Yasur below Mitzvahs Hamelech, Amo Berosho. If you leave without permission, you will be killed. Okay, but he couldn't have asked Esther to explain to Achashverosh, my uncle / husband's in a bit of a bind. He doesn't want to offend you. He doesn't like, very pirate. But I think underlying the question is this sense of frustration, like Mordechai, what do you have to put us in this place to begin with? And lastly, there are sources that are downright upset at Mordechai for making this decision. So just to give you, I have here in 14 and 15 places in the Torah where our patriarchs happily bow down. In source number 14, this is where Abram runs to his guests that he sees when he's recovering from the Milah. He bows down to them. The Bereshis, Mami Gimel, this is where Yaakov bows down to Esav. That's okay, that's true. But so what about this in case where Yaakov submits himself to Esav? Yaakov bows down to Esav. What about Jewish pride there? Okay, it doesn't have the religious dimension. Okay, but I'm just showing you that bowing down was a socially acceptable thing to do. And it wasn't always seen as an act of idolatry. For us today, with our social etiquette, bowing down would be seen as something that's clearly religious in meaning. But in those days, it was similar to our, you shake someone's hand, you bow your head, something along those lines, which is socially acceptable today. They would fully bow down. So what was Mordechai doing? So if you look in source number 16, the Gemara Megillah tries to understand why Mordechai is both tied to the tribe of Yehuda and tied to the true tribe of Binyamin. And the Gemara includes the interpretation of Rava. In source number 16, Rava Amar, Rava says, Knesset Yisrael Amra Li'idach Gisa. So Knesset Yisrael, basically, they want to be blamed, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, for having Mordechai. Let me show you the language. Re'u ma asali Yehuda u'ma shilim li yamini. Do you see what Judah did to me? Do you see how the tribe of Binyamin paid us back? Ma asali Yehuda. You know what Judah did? Listen to this next line. The lo katli David Shimi. David didn't kill Shimi, who was someone from the tribe of Benjamin. It's Yalid Minei Mordechai. Mordechai was a descendant of Shimi. Listen to these next three words. De Mikani Be Haman. That's a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic. What's de Mikani? What's Kaneh? Jealousy. De Mikani Be Haman. Mordechai basically instigated the jealousy of Haman. Mordechai basically picked a fight. And in this Gemara, Rava says that we are upset at the tribe of, well, in this case, we're actually upset at the tribe of Yehuda. We're upset at David for not killing Shimi. Because had he killed Shimi, we wouldn't have had a Mordechai. And you know what mess Mordechai got us into? The Mikani Bey Haman. He angered Haman. He, what is it called? To stoke the coal, right? He basically was getting Haman all upset over nothing. He could have bowed down and let be. So you see over here this tone of frustration at Mordecai. Why didn't you just bow down and let it be? There's nothing wrong with bowing down. It's not a religious act. So the answer is, well, yes. In other words, all of the above. On the one hand, you have midrashim that say, on the one hand, you have midrashim that speak very positively. The parallel to Yosef is as the implication that Mordecai did the right thing. You have this pariv back and forth in Ibn Ezra. Why did Mordecai ask to transfer? Well, he couldn't. It's the best we could do. And then you have an outright angry statement of Rava that it would have been better if Mordecai would not have lived. Because after all, if Mordecai, who is that downstairs? But if Mordecai would not have lived, we wouldn't have gotten ourselves into this mess to begin with. Wow. Very, very different takes on this issue. And a lot of this stems from the fact that the text is ambiguous. We don't really know why Mordecai did not bow down. We know that Mordecai told the officers that he's a Jew. He's a Jew. And therefore what? You're a Jew and what? And therefore it's a religious issue. Therefore it's a nationalistic issue. We don't really know very much. We think we know a lot because we know the story. We've looked at the pictures. But when you delve down deeper, you see that it's far more complex and ambiguous than meets the eye. So I think we actually leave the class with more questions than answers, but hopefully we're able to look at this group of psukim here with a more analytical eye, with a more nuanced eye, and see that the Megillah is definitely sending us some messages. How you interpret those messages depends on which commentaries you read and which take you have. Just to finish off with one interesting thought, Rabbi Alex Israel in his article just notes that the struggle of Mordecai is likely the struggle that many Jews have in the exile in terms of how much do you stand up for yourself? How much do you have this sense of I'm a Jew and I'm unwilling to follow suit in the culture, in the religion, and whatever it is that's going on in the environment in which you live? And how much you try to say, listen, I'm just a guest here. I need to blend in the mix. I don't want to cause any controversy. That is a ongoing issue that Jews have to deal with when they live in a country that is not their own. I remember when my brother Daniel was a high school senior. With this I close. His team advanced very far into the mock trial finals. And the final game, or the final court date, was on Shabbos. And there was a big question within the school: do we fight this? This wasn't something that was done anti-Semitically. For years, there's never been a Jewish school that's made it to the finals of mock trial. And for years, having the final competition on Saturday was like not a big deal. This was fine. This was the first time that it has come up. So do we say, oh, you know what, just let be, the competition as a whole is very encouraging of Jewish schools' participations, or do we say this is not acceptable and you have to make a special accommodation for us? It's not so clear what the right answer is. And in their case, I believe the mock trial competition was willing to make an exception. And if they would actually advance the very, very last stage, they would have the trial after Shabbos. But I remember that it didn't sit so well with everybody. I'm just thinking back. It didn't sit so well. Maybe we should just let it be. And if we get to the final, bow out and not ruffle anybody's feathers. So that conflict might have been some of what Mordecai was struggling with all of those years ago. So I think it's just fascinating to look with more of an analytical eye. And if I've left you with more questions than answers, that's sometimes my job. Thank you very much for joining me today.